Hi everyone, and welcome to today's flash webinar using auction insights for competitive advantage. My name is Jamie Newton and I am the communications manager at Hanapin Marketing, and I'll be moderating today's presentation. Presenting to you today is Jeff Allen, Hanapin's tried and true president. Hey Jeff, how are you doing today?
Good.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Jeff is not only our president, but he also blogs on PPC Hero. He speaks at a number of events around the globe, including our own conference series, HeroConf. And if you want to follow him on Twitter at Jeff Allen UT, and that UT is for Utah. We call him Jeff Allen Utah. Before we get started, we have just a couple of housekeeping items. If you want to join the conversation, use the hashtag ThinkPPC in your Twitter tweets, or use the webinar question box to send us your questions. We'll do a live Q&A at the end of today's presentation. If you'll go ahead and give a hello to us and make sure you can hear us in the question box, we'll just make sure you can hear us real well. So one more thing, we have a live poll question. We want to know how you manage your accounts. Are you part of an in-house PPC team? Do you do all the marketing including PPC? Do you work at an agency, or are you a consultant? Jeff, while people are answering that live poll question, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So I've been in the industry for about 15 years. Actually got started more in email and SEO back in the day before I got into PPC. My role at Hanapin is mostly to try to wrangle the team and keep them happy and everything like that. But from the client side, make sure we're thinking about our client's business in the right way. We're understanding the market they're in. We're understanding the problems they're facing internally and externally. And we're putting together a strategy and a plan of action to address that. So that's why I'm talking about auction insights, one of my favorite things to talk about, not just what's happening within your walls, but in your competitors as well.
Awesome. All right, looks like we have our results in. 39% of you are from an in-house PPC team. 28% of you do all the marketing, including PPC. 28% of you work at an agency, and just a small percent are a consultant. Well, welcome, guys. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, I appreciate filling this out. It certainly helps me as I go through this and think through the way we're talking about the different areas of auction insights. I'll make sure to talk through how it impacts different types of people.
Great. All right. Well, without further ado, Jeff Allen, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jamie. So lucky or unlucky for you guys, you have to listen to my nasally, mumbly voice, but I'll do my best to not bore you. I find that a lot of times when we talk in auction insights, we're actually going about it all wrong. What I see happen more times than not is a client or a boss pushes us because performance is down, or we don't understand what performance is going to look like next month, or there's some anomaly in one of our metrics, and we say, well, maybe competition's a factor, and then we dig into auction insights or whatever other tool we might have. And I just think that's kind of backwards. It's kind of the old adage that you hear from time to time on agencies specifically will take all the credit when things are great, and the second the performance turns negative, it's because some butterfly in Brazil flapped its wings, and that's the cause. So I think that instead of just focusing on, okay, we need to explain something that's happening with the auction insights, you should actually look at auction insights on a more consistent basis, maybe every couple months, to understand, is there anything we should be paying attention to and that is impacting our results? And really do it from an unbiased, let's just take a look, see what's out there, and once we notice something interesting, actually address it. The first step of this I'm going to talk a little bit about preparing the data. This is a manual way. There's two other ways to do it besides what I'm going to talk about. One is there's a script, or probably several scripts out there that you can use that will pull the data automatically. It speeds up the process quite a bit and can do it automatically and on whatever time basis you want. And we also internally have a macro that we use that does a lot of this that cuts down the time quite a bit. But I'm going to talk about the manual way so that anyone can participate in it. If you want, I'll give you half a second to grab a pen and a piece of paper. If you want, I'm going to give you my email address, And you can email me, and I will certainly send you a link to the scripts I'm talking about. And I didn't think about it until right before this, but I can probably also send you the macro that we developed internally. I need to look at it and make sure we're not giving away any state secrets or anything like that, but I don't think we would be. So if you email me, it's just my name, jeff.allen@hanapinmarketing.com. Or you can reach out on Twitter, and I'll make sure to get you at least those scripts, but potentially the macro as well. So steps for preparing the actual report: export auction insights, export performance stats, format the data, and build charts, which I'm going to walk through in more detail. But before you do that, one of the things that I find always used to take me a lot of time, or does take me the most time, is going through exporting all the data, auction insights and performance data, and then realizing I don't have the right metrics, or realizing I used the wrong dates, or realizing I don't have the right campaign or the keyword or the account as a whole, the way I'm trying to look at it, right, and so I have to go back and re-download and reset everything back up. So it's really important when you start out to do auction insights, really any report, you think through a couple key questions to make sure you do it right the first time and save yourself some time. The first one is how granular should be. So auction insights, you can do it at campaign level, an account level, ad group level, keyword level. And it's really important to understand what you're trying to learn. My default is typically to do all campaigns but brand if I'm trying to see a big overall trend. But if you're an e-commerce site with several different products that are very different price points and very different activity, it probably makes sense to group those together using labels or something like that and looking at those campaigns in buckets. Or there's certainly some accounts that have 10 keywords that drive 90% of all the volume, and it might make sense to only look at those 10 keywords and try to understand what's happening with them. But regardless, you really should step back and think through how granular do I want to be in this data? What am I really trying to understand? Is it a big trend that impacts the whole business, or is it something that impacts some segment of it? And then you want to look at what time period you're looking, what you want to look at. Is this a more recent trend? Do you want to look year over year? Do you want to look, first 6 months of the year compared to the last 6 months of the previous year, whatever that looks like for you? But again, it's important because you're going to have to export 2 different data sets, and you need to make sure they're in the same range. You also need to think through not just with the time frame, but how you want to segment it, week by week, month by month, year by year. Again, so when you export the performance data and the auction insights, you're doing both in the same date ranges. And then you want to look at what metrics you should use. This is the one usually with performance is the biggest impact, which we'll get into, but do you want to download cost per click or really cost and then click so you can figure out cost per click? Do you want to look at conversion rates or clicks and conversions so you can figure out your conversion rates? But it's thinking through what are you trying to understand. If you're just looking at auction insights, you can just export all the metrics. It's pretty simple and straightforward. But once you look at the performance data alongside of it, you really need to think through that. And one that a person on our team named Juice, really his name's Jake, but we call him Juice, invented is a stat called rank above share. It's impression share times position above rate. So it's something you can do as a calculated field in a pivot table in a later step. But this actually shows you not just the impression share of the competitor to understand is that competitor showing a lot of the auctions that you are, but what percent of that time are they showing above you? So if someone has an impression share of 20%, but they're only showing up 10% of the time above you, their rank above share would only be 2%. Probably has a small impact on your business. But someone that has an impression share of 20%, but a position above rate of 90%, all of a sudden they have an 18% or whatever that math breaks out to, and so you can see that they probably have a much bigger, larger impact on your actual business. And so it's a really good metric. You can still use it however you want to. And then who should you compare your competitors, who you should compare yourself against is the next one. So when you look at auction insights, especially if you look over a long time, and especially if you look at it at a campaign level, you're going to have a lot of competitors in there that only showed up for a couple weeks here or there, a month here or there. Who maybe sometimes you actually want to compare yourself to them because maybe you're seeing wild fluctuations in performance and that's what you're trying to understand. But a lot of times what I find is I only want to compare myself to the ones that are more consistent in the auction so I can understand those that are staying in the auctions together, how our strategies are impacting each other, try to understand what their strategy may be. So once you've thought through all that, you can download the Auction Insight Report. It's really easy in the Details tab. You can do by all or selected, so that's why I say I'll usually select all the campaigns except the brand campaign, typically most common. And then I'll export all the stats I can, all the actual columns, And at this point, you don't have to worry about which competitors. You can't really do anything about it. You're just going to download all the different competitors that you have access to. And I'm going to then put it in Excel, or it's going to come in Excel. I'm going to throw it in a pivot table with my rows being the date ranges. So in this case, you can tell I looked at a 4-week period, week by week. And I'm going to pivot at the top by the different competitors and then the different metrics I have available here. So here, this kind of screenshot, you can only see a little tiny sliver of it because this ends up being a million miles long, or wide, I should say. But you can see I'm looking here at the max, or the position above rate, so how often the competitors are showing above me, and below that showing all the individual competitors. And at this point, this is where I can go through this and start deleting out, or I really copy this and paste it as values only, so I'm not deleting out the pivot table, but I can start deleting out the competitors I don't want to look at, or if there's any metrics for some reason I don't want to look at. So in this case, AK Tour Center only showed up once. Most recently, that may be one I don't want to show up for. Alaska Train, same thing. Booking.com shows up half the time. That's when I'm going to start considering, okay, let's see how their different metrics are impacting us. So you would go through that. It's a pretty manual process. Like I said, the macro cuts all this out and does it for you. But here you're just kind of going through and being consistent about which of these competitors you're going to keep and which ones you're going to lose. And then the next step is you go and download your performance report. So you go back into AdWords, you download for the same campaigns that you downloaded the Auction Insights report for the same date ranges, and you download the different metrics you want. You can see here I've done some calculated fields for cost per click and conversion rate and stuff like that. And this is going to allow me to map this data. So I'm going to be able to map 6-1 performance metrics, like sum of converted clicks, compared to Auction Insights metrics, such as like position above or impression share or average position, things like that. So that, in the end, you're going to have a big Excel sheet with, I usually do them in separate tabs. So one tab with that pivot table that's been, have my competitors deleted out of it that I don't want to look at. Another tab that's going to have your performance data in it. And you just go from there and create all your charts, right? So you just decide which ones you want. And I usually don't have a preconceived notion of this. I usually think more is better, and then I'm going to look at the ones that start telling me something interesting and sometimes change them up. So I'm going to show some examples in a second, 2 different case studies, I guess you would call them, of using this information. But really, I look at stuff like cost per click compared to rank above and compared to impression share by competitor. Impression share by competitor tells me if all their impression shares are increasing and my cost per click is increasing, well, there's a really good chance increased competition is inflating my cost per click. And then cost per click compared to average position and everything like that. So we'll get into that in a bit more. A couple of steps I like to take when I'm diagnosing this information, or really any kind of report like this. And again, this is part of the reason why I don't try to do Auction Insights when I'm trying to explain something that's happening, because you're coming in with a preconceived notion. You're going to come in and say, well, I think CPC is raising because of my competition, so let me run a bunch of data that tells me that story. And you can make data tell you any story you want, and so you can probably find a way to make it tell you that. So I try to be, as much as I can, as much as any human can, it's impartial when starting this out. And first think about, are there any changes and patterns that I can identify just looking at the eyeballing the chart and graph? Anything that stands out, big spikes, big valleys, things that are consistent that doesn't seem like they should be consistent, or 2 months ago I had 2 competitors and now I have 12 competitors, anything like that that makes me think, maybe something's going on here. And then once I have that list, and it needs to be somewhat short, so you need to not just identify any change in pattern, but anything that seems meaningful, I make a list of potential causes of those changes in patterns. So let's say I have 5 different big things I see. I used to have 2 competitors, now I have 12. My CPC used to be $1, now it's $2. My rank above used to be really high, now it's really low. I'm going to list a bunch of different causes, any cause that I can think that would lead to that. I'm not worried at this point about what's plausible or possible. I'm just thinking about what really could lead to this cause. I might come up with 5 or 6 different causes for each. And then I'm going to go through each of those and actually say, okay, what are the conditions needed for this to exist? So this is the point when I think, okay, what's really plausible here? Of all these things, in order for my competition to increase that much and it be caused by high profit margins in the industry and a lot of exposure about it, has there been high exposure to this industry, or does it have high profit margins? And so I'm really thinking through and crossing through anything that just doesn't pass the sniff test of the world outside can kind of support this cause that led to this pattern. And then usually I end up with 2 or 3 per change in pattern, and I say, okay, which is the most likely? And let's start there, and let's create a 2 to 3 tactical plan to address it. So it seems pretty hard, and it seems maybe cumbersome, but one, yeah, it probably takes 20 or 30 minutes to go through this process, but 2, you end up with much more clear thinking at the end, and you're not just supporting what you want it to say, or you're not just supporting what you think will happen, but you're actually learning something new and much better understanding the world around you. And sometimes it's bad news, as in one of these case studies will show. So in the first example, this is what we look like for impression share versus search CPC. So I was just looking at my impression share versus search, and you can see this day was over 13 months, and so I could see year over year for the most recent month. And what you see is a pretty dramatic spike in the blue line in CPC around November, around November, and a corresponding decrease in impression share around the same time, although impression share kind of ends up the same place it does 13 months ago, but CPC ends up dramatically higher. So this is interesting to me. Those 2 lines cross. Anytime 2 lines and then a chart cross, I start to get interested by it. But certainly the kind of dramatic increase in one, decrease in the other. So I also wanted to look at just impression share across all my competitors. So if my impression share looks like that, what's happening in the environment? And this is a really ugly graph, and this is after I've already gone in and kind of deleted some of the competitors that I thought, okay, I thought this one would be interesting, but maybe it's not. There's a bunch of different ones listed out. But first of all, the most telling thing is 13 months ago, I had 4 people. 4 of these competitors were in the space, and it doesn't mean 4 of all competitors, but 4 of the same competitors. And now, if you try to add up all those little colored lines, and obviously you'd have the data, so it'd be easier to do this if you were looking at that. But you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8 maybe different competitors. So competition's more or less doubled in the space in terms of numbers of competition. And you also know there's generally a downward slope for everyone over that period of time, which makes sense. If there's more people competing in the space, then everyone is also going to see a corresponding drop in impression share because there's only so many impressions available. So it's interesting on one hand, and okay, there's a lot more competition, but I'm seeing a pattern myself, which was that drop in impression share for us, that the rest of my competitors are seeing too. It's not just unique to me. So I started thinking, okay, maybe there's something external happening that's not just happening within my 4 walls. And unfortunately, it's not a very good explanation, right? It's, well, maybe it's just everyone really liked your product, thought it looked great, and wanted to get in the same market as you. Or maybe your competitors all learned what PPC was in the last 6 months and entered the space. Whatever it is, you're going to have to figure out some way to validate that information and supplement it. And I had to put a picture of John Stockton in his short shorts in here because, as Jamie said, I'm from Utah and we love John Stockton in his short shorts, and this serves no purpose other than to counterbalance the fact that I had to put Michael Jordan on here, which pains me greatly. So the last one I looked at is say, okay, well, if all my competitive metrics are doing this, what's my impression share versus cost per lead doing? As my cost per click has gone up, in the first slide, remember, cost per click had gone up drastically. Did I do that and not see a raise in CPC? So maybe my conversion rate has gotten so much better that I've started bidding more aggressively, and it's okay that that's increased, and I've counterbalanced the increased competition with that, or not. And you can look here, the cost per lead, if you put it next to the cost per click, it follows almost exactly, which means everything else held true. Cost, conversion rate stayed similar, but as we lost impression share, we bid more aggressively to try to make up that lost volume. We didn't necessarily do it because our impression share didn't go up, and we successfully increased our cost per click and our cost per lead. And at this point, there's a couple actions, and this is the point where, as an agency, we'd have a conversation with our client about, hey, we're not going to make this decision for you. We always say we don't want to make business decisions for our clients. We want to make PPC decisions for them. So do you want us to continue to inflate our CPC and fight that battle and try to make up impression share, knowing that your cost per lead is going to go up? And you can use this graph to talk about what that looks like. We know when impression share was around 40%, cost per lead was around $120. So maybe we can get back there if that's okay. Or do you want us to get back down to that 60, 80 range which may mean a drastic loss in impression share from where you're at today. So what's really mattering to you now? Volume or efficiency? Those are the type of conversations you can have. And those are the kind of ways I would address this issue. But at the end of the day, this starting with, we actually weren't trying to explain what was happening with performance or lead volume or anything like that. This was just, let's take a look at the competitive environment and what we can learn from it. And we learned it's getting much, much more competitive. And at the end of the day, the client can take that and not only set expectations internally for what PPC might be able to generate for them, but more importantly can say, okay, our space in general is getting more competitive. PPC is a great indicator of what's happening in the world around us. So let's go ahead and think more strategically next 6 months, 12 months about how we're going to combat that. I'll go through this next example much quicker since you've kind of seen all these different graphs and because I'm blabbering on and on. But this one, impression share versus CPC, so this is a different client. You notice impression share and CPC both decline, follow similar patterns. It's interesting as we've dropped, what I kind of saw this, I said, okay, well, as we've dropped bids and dropped cost per click, maybe impression share has dropped as well. Maybe this is a strategic initiative to lower efficiency, or increase efficiency, I guess, lower cost per lead. And then I looked at impression share and said, okay, this again, lots of lines on here, but if you count the lines on the left and you count the lines on the right, you end up with about the same number of competitors. And while some have gone up and some have gone down, relatively flat directionally across the board. And we want to see what happens with CPC and average position. As we bid down, did something happen with position? And sure enough, you see actually right before we started bidding down, a change in average position, which is pretty interesting, although this data may not line up perfectly, right, because you may have changed bids in the middle of a week, and this data is week over week or month over month in this case. But you see that average position did get worse, went from 2 to 3 as cost per click and cost per lead went down, which tells us, okay, we actually had an impact. This is internal. This was a strategic decision we made. It wasn't competition that drove this down. We decided to change our cost per click. It lowered our average position, and that resulted in a lost impression share, which again could spark conversation around, do we want to try to get that lost impression share back, increase bids, was it not worth the efficiency gains we might have had in order to do this. But regardless, we know this is an internal decision we made, and so hopefully it's the right internal decision that we made based on what was going on, but we can't blame it on external forces because what we saw in the competitive auctions wouldn't support that. And then a position above rate was the last one we looked at just to verify that, and sure enough, you see as we bid down towards the right when CPC was dropping and impression share was getting worse, position above our competitors started showing up ahead of us more and more. So again, decision was made to lower bids. That resulted in everything we're seeing. Again, internal strategy led to the performance change. And that's it. I told you, I promised you I'd go through that last one quick. Remember that you can email me, jeff.allen@hanapinmarketing.com if you'd like to see the macro or link to those scripts. I'll do my best to get back to you in the next day or two. And I think Jamie might have some questions for us.
I have a personal question. Why does it pain you so much to have Michael Jordan on your slide? I mean, it's Michael Jordan.
It's Michael Jordan, and it is the Michael Jordan that knocked Utah out of the NBA Finals in 1997 and 1998. The only 2 years Utah had any chance in any business being in the finals.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, can't you love them both? It's Michael Jordan. Well, it looks like we don't have any questions coming through. So we're running out of time anyway. So if you guys, like Jeff said, if you want to email him or if you want to follow him on Twitter at JeffAllenUT. If you have any feedback for us, you can email marketing@hanapinmarketing.com. And thank you so much for attending today. See you later.